Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our first YouTube exclusive EDU. Starting this month, the plan is to roll out 2 to 4 EDUs exclusive just to YouTube, which is great because it's free. And I did have to separate our Patreon content for our paid subscribers, so I still wanted to roll something out to all of you who follow me on YouTube. And so this month, if you're not signed up for our e-newsletter, make sure you do that because I'm always kind of sending out heads up in our e-newsletters, and it is free. You just got to go to the website, Grave Intentions Goods, and sign up. But this month I am focusing our EDU on butterflies, the spiritual implications and applications of working with and using butterflies in magic. And so I'm going to roll out a whole PowerPoint and walk you through it just like I used to with our Patreon clients, and just kind of give you some ideas on what you at home as a home practitioner can do with butterflies. So make sure you sign up for that e-newsletter because part of the reason why I chose butterflies this month, I also just did an article on Substack about butterflies, is because we are starting within the next week or two, I hope, knock on wood, our live butterfly habitat for Conjure here in Minneapolis. And so it's not a butterfly slaughterhouse, you guys, calm down. Butterflies, especially painted ladies, they only have a lifespan of about 3 to 5 weeks. And we do use them in Conjure. We let them live out their life, and then we work with them after that as well. So I'm going to go through that in today's EDU so you understand what that is, because sometimes I think people have weird ideas about what we do here. So let me pull up the PowerPoint and we'll jump right into it. All right, this is always the hard part, you guys. I'm not very techy. All right, here we go. I think I did it the first time. Wow, I'm impressed with myself today. Okay, so the butterfly. I want to talk about the soul applications, the symbolism, and the synchronicity. I'm using a lot of S words today, so bear with me. And so butterflies historically have been used in many, many belief systems. If we look at mythology, if we look at astrology, if we look at lineage transmission, or even quantum theory, butterflies are there. So it's a big deal if you haven't worked with butterflies yet. So let me break it down. So why the butterfly? First question, right? It is the creature that most of us will meet in our life. First of all, that kind of fully dissolves and rebuilds itself, which is wild when you think about it, turning to mush and then calibrating your existence. The butterfly is one of the few living creatures that are able to do that, from caterpillar, chrysalis, the wings. I mean, it's crazy how they just, I mean, do you ever stop and think about how crazy that is? Like, imagine if we were able to do that. That's wild, right? Anyway, the point is, inside that chrysalis, the caterpillar's body breaks down into like a living soup, like a goo. And it resembles, something not with wings or beautiful at all. I don't know if any of you have done the live butterfly habitats at home. They sell them on the internet now. Back in the day when I was first introduced to them, you could only get them at museums. And I'll talk about that today too. But, this is not a costume change, right? This is a full complete rebuild cell by cell. So that is magical in and of itself, is it not? So I think that single biological fact is why almost nearly every tradition on earth has reached for the same imagery associated spiritually to describe the soul, death, rebirth, and they use the butterfly to do that. So I want to kind of talk about the historical kind of belief systems before I get into modern day applications and practices. So let's talk about Psyche. Obviously, not all of you are practicing in Hellenism. So, okay, so let me try to break this down in bite-sized pieces. Sometimes I get ahead of myself, but Psyche is the Greek word for soul. It's the same word for butterfly. And Psyche, of course, is a deity many of you may be familiar with. And so leaving the deical part of that aside, this is not like a poetic coincidence, layered on after the fact, right? It's really built directly into the language. The goddess Psyche is shown with butterfly wings. It's understood to be this visible shape that a soul takes when it leaves the body. tradition does have a tendency to encode itself into vocabulary. That's why in Buddhism, the sacred words, the sacred sounds, it all kind of interconnects. It's kind of a signal, right? When we're casting, when we are spiritually elevating or manifesting, it's a signal of a sort of association that really runs deeper than the decoration of it all, right? Because butterflies are beautiful, but there's a much bigger energetic impact there, which is what we're talking about today. All right. So, oops, boy, come on, laptop. All right. So, we're going to talk about just a couple of global threads here that use the butterfly symbolism. So in Mexico, during Dia de Muertos, I've been there once during Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead, Halloween. It's a beautiful time to visit Mexico. It's so beautiful. Their culture is just amazing in terms of how they celebrate their dead. But it does fall during monarch migration. I'm going to be using painted lady butterflies. I have used monarchs in the past. They are beautiful. They're just a little bit harder to keep alive in captivity, in terms of feeding and care. But they are received as like returning ancestral spirits in Mexico. In Japan, a butterfly entering the home is a visiting spirit. One alone is usually like an omen, or if there's two together, it's usually a sign of like a baby or marriage or something like really joyful about to happen. In China, there is that butterfly lovers legend. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but it's usually, the story goes, it's two devoted souls that are transformed into butterflies rather than being parted at death. And then in Ireland, there's a lot of folk tradition around butterflies. They believe that white butterflies near the house marks a soul passing through the house. So that's an interesting belief system from Ireland there. The element that butterflies, we do have a lot of planetary and elemental correspondences with butterflies as well. So the element, of course, obviously is air, breath, intangibility, thought, kind of given form. Some people I've heard people compare butterflies and butterfly work in spiritual practice to egregores, or the creation of egregores. Butterflies do ride, wind. They ride the updraft. They're creatures of the air. They carry the air itself. So it is an air element, being entity. It does have associations to Mercury, messenger between states definitely is something the butterfly falls into, kind of like that psychopomp function, carrying word from one world to another. It has Uranian implications, sudden and total transformation. It's not really evolution. It's like rupture and reinvention, which is Uranian. And then it has some Neptunian aspects, and we are going into a Neptune retrograde, I think tomorrow through, is it mid-December? I'll have to double check my star maps, but we are going into a retrograde with Neptune. But the butterfly with Neptune is that dissolution of form, spirit, the soul's substance, right? That chrysalis itself, kind of astrologically, being represented through the stages of a butterfly's lifespan. So it does have, if you are doing astrological talismanic work, astrological casting work, definitely Mercury, Uranus, and Neptune are the three associations. If you're doing elemental work, definitely air or fire. Fire definitely is a big one. So, all right, moving on. All right, the life cycle as a transit map. I'm always talking about like mapping out the spiritual work and the plan. So with a butterfly, we have these four very specific kind of transit cycles. And when we work with butterflies in a conjure habitat, where we are raising butterflies for the purpose of conjure, each stage is very, very important in that process. So we start with the egg. The egg is the potential, right? It's the natal seed. It's what a chart carries before anything has moved, right? It's that new moon energy also. Then we have the second stage, which is larva. That's the growth stage where you're growing a seed that you have planted. This is that steady accumulation, right? It's Saturn and it's Jupiter. It's building structure and it's building mass to be transformed later. And then we have the third stage, which is that chrysalis stage. It's death and rebirth. It is the total dissolution of the old form, the old energy, right? Pluto and Saturn transits really apply here. It's the hard, necessary undoing, which sucks for a lot of us when we go through these periods, but necessary for change, necessary for evolution, necessary for manifestation. And then we have the last stage, which is emergence. This is the expansion, right? So this is Uranian, this is Jupiterian. So if you're working during Uranus or Jupiter transits, this definitely would apply. But it's that sudden flight, right? It's the expansion into form the old self couldn't have held on to. So I wanted to break down the 4 stages we work with in Conjure and how we start with that egg and we go through the emergence. I also wanted to give you the astrological correspondences to each one of these stages as well, because depending on if you are somebody who, I do a lot of Southern Conjure, a lot of Appalachian Grandma Conjure. But if you're somebody who's strictly into astrological talismanic work, this is going to be more important for you, knowing about the transits and the planetary associations during each stage of having this kind of living, growing conjure garden, right? All right. So, I talk about lineage transmission a lot. I'm actually at the end stages of edits on my book, which has a lot to do with lineage transmission. And so I've been putting that in more and more of my material. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's just in my brain. So it keeps purging out of me however it can. But, it's symbol knowledge, right? It it's beyond theory. It's beyond theoretical. When we talk about lineage transmission, we're talking about something that's handed down through direct experience, and it's something that becomes practice. Now, when we're working with something like the butterfly, a living creature, I brought up a story about my daughters in this presentation, a couple stories. When my daughters were really, really young, we did talk about things like metamorphosis, transformation. They didn't understand it, and I don't know if I really fully understood it back then either. But we did a lot of habitats. We had frogs, we had these little baby turtles, we had so many things we had snakes, birds, you name it, we had it when they were little. And we raised them in our own home from egg to flight a lot of times. And then we would release them. Well, not all of them. Some of them could not be released or they would have been, killed or harmed. But anyway, you get what I'm saying, right? So this is something that many of you that come to me have families and you involve your children or your parents or what have you, your partners in your practice. So this is part of that lineage transmission. Working with butterflies is a beautiful way to transmit an energetic source to your line of practice. This was one way that we did that, working with butterflies, me and my daughters when they were very, very young. So it's how lineage transmission actually works. It's not like a lecture, but it's more of like a witness cycle that whether it's your child, your parent, your partner can kind of point back to later on and say, hey, I was there for that, right? This is one of these projects that definitely would fall into that category. A lot of you ask me about family projects or couples projects that you can do to build that practice together. And I would suggest doing a butterfly garden. It's very easy and it crosses all the T's and dots all the I's in terms of developing this transmission. And it's something that can carry over generationally. So I like it. Signs and synchronicities with the butterfly. I kind of jump around here in the presentation. This is my first one for YouTube, so I'm a little bit jumpy and I've had a long day, so bear with me, you guys. So the timing, if you see butterflies, is it appearing around a significant date, a decision, a grief period? A lot of times with signs and synchronicities, we really need to evaluate and track what we're seeing and when and what's going on in the background. I think we also need to track repetition. So a lot of people who are associating different signs and synchronicities to whether it's a butterfly or a number pattern, that repetition is important because, one sighting is a moment, right? But if the same species or the same color of butterfly keeps showing up again and again and again, that's a pattern that you need to be logging, right? Because now there's messaging, it looks like, involved. Again, the species and the color, a lot of times when we're looking at the research, the background, the studies on this, white usually symbolizes a mourning event coming soon. Orange is usually an ancestral return or presence. Black is usually during shadow work periods. Um, and I have a chart on this. I think I did it in my article on Substack, and I talk about it briefly in here, but I'm just kind of throwing out some information about the butterfly and the different aspects of it in spirituality before I start giving you some examples of how to work with them. Um, but definitely the color and the species tend to carry a message as well. So these should be tracked. The emotional charge, right? A synchronicity usually announces itself. It's kind of like this small jolt of attention or recognition, I guess is a better word, maybe. It's very distinct from the ordinary noticing that we go through from, in our day-to-day lives. So pay attention to that and track that as well. Then there is the quantum parallel. You know me, I believe that magic is a science, just like physics, and I think quantum entanglement, morphic resonance, and all these things play a part in magical practices. And so I'm always bringing that up, right? And sciencey people don't like it, but here it is. It's the same thing, just different language. So the quantum parallel here, I wanted to talk about two theories. I wanted to talk about superposition before the collapse and entanglement. I'm always talking about entanglement at the moment of release. So with superposition, let's talk about the caterpillar. The caterpillar already carries those imaginal cells. Okay. It's the blueprint for their wings. It's that map, that, what do we want to call it? That blueprint. It's dormant inside a body that looks nothing like a butterfly, right? So, in quantum terms, the butterfly form exists as potential before it ever collapses into the observed physical result. That's part of superposition. Now, entanglement at the moment of release, when an intention is spoken at the exact instant a butterfly is released, the working links, okay, a stated desire to a system already mid transformation. So that is a form of entanglement. One event correlated to another across the release. And so that's where we have this quantum parallel with physics and with spirituality working with the butterfly. So it's just something to be aware of, and you can dive deeper into it, of course. So there were two different releases when the kids were younger that presented in two different structured manifestations. Both times that we did this, the girls made wishes that at the moment of release that manifested very, very quickly and unmistakably. Okay. So the first time it happened, we had a home habitat, a home garden. I got it at the Milwaukee Public Museum. I think Maddie was in kindergarten. I think Lainey, well, let's see if Maddie was in no. Lainey was in preschool. So Lainey was 3 or 4. So that means Maddie must have been 8. So maybe she was in first or second grade. Gosh, I can't remember, but they were very, very little. Anyway, the point is, they were raised through every single stage at home with my daughters, egg to adult, fed and watched every single day, and then released together once they were grown. And then the second situation was when Maddie was graduating 8th grade. That was our graduation release. And so that was years later. How old was Maddie in 8th grade? Let me think, 17, 16. Maddie was 14, 13 or 14. I can't remember. But years later, then we did this group. It was family and friends for her graduation butterfly release at this graduation party. So it was the exact same working at a larger scale. We didn't raise them from egg to adult. I used one of those butterfly release companies, but it was to mark a threshold crossing for Madison. And again, same thing, manifestation requests were made at the time of release and they manifested very, very quickly. And so these are my two case studies I'm giving you today. When they were very little and then a little bit older, same experience, different wishes, same very, very rapid manifestation of those wishes. One of them being kind of a wild, surprising thing that manifested. So it works. All right. So when we talk about butterflies in root work and talismanic work, okay, obviously we want to ethically source any kind of wings or specimens. Butterflies, like I said, they have a very short lifespan, 3 to 5 weeks in captivity. Sometimes that's cut down to 2 weeks. Um, Not because they're suffering or anything. It's just because, they're not doing the full gist of things, I guess. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I remember reading about it, and I'm trying to think of what the reasons were for the shortened lifespan when they are bred in captivity. And I, for the life of me, cannot remember right now. I think maybe it has something to do with food, because, you feed them like orange slices and sugar and things like that. So I think it might be what they're consuming. So, anyways, moving on. So in cast work, I use butterfly wings that are sourced ethically through a preservationist that I work with. They're never wild caught. They're never killed to serve a working, because that's just bad juju in my book, right? Because they have such a short lifespan, they are readily available. There are people that have huge habitats and they live very happy, full lives. And then once they're dead, they are, either preserved or passed on to workers like myself. So, and they're out there. You just got to find them. Be careful with Amazon. I don't recommend using places like Amazon for sourcing any kind of specimen, to be honest with you. You just can't verify where they're coming from and what their life looked like before they passed, right? So a wing carries the same weight the folklore points to, right? It's a completed metamorphosis, bound directly into the piece. So when I do butterfly rootwork casts, which by the way are active again, for a while I had that taken down because I had to wait for my preservationist to supply me more butterfly specimens. Um, but in puppetry and talismanic work too, it's just very well suited to transformational work, any kind of transition, soul messaging workings, specifically soul retrieval from fragmentation, love workings, healing, repair, and restoration workings. The material itself is doing symbolic work. It's not decorative work. A lot of people consider, oh, look at that beautiful butterfly going into the fire on the candle bed with the herbs. It's just beautiful. Well, it's more than that. It's an energetic signature. It's very symbolic, and it is recognized by the universe due to that symbolism. So it's not just pretty. You don't want to do just pretty. I always talk about this, everybody on TikTok making the pretty candles. You need more than pretty. And 9 times out of 10, if you are really following a compound, it's probably not going to be real pretty. You can roll it around in glitter when you're done and try to jazz it up a little bit, but you're dealing with roots and herbs and curios that just aren't pretty. So I don't know how these people make all these pretty things that are, very powerful, because if you're following a compound recipe, that's hard to do. Anyways, I just wanted to talk about, the ethical sourcing and the fact that these are not just for aesthetics. These have a very strong energetic signature in any kind of root work or talismanic work. All right, so the Conjure Butterfly Garden, um, and this is something that you can think about doing too. So here at my home in Minneapolis, in the next week or so, as soon as I get my shit together, we will have a live conjure garden raising painted ladies. So that's a species with a natural lifespan of only 3 to 5 weeks, and like I said, often less in captivity. Um, I am going to specifically, before I start the live garden, I will have the listing up on our main website, because I want to attach individuals targeted with their petitions for manifestation to each butterfly from seed to Setner free. And that will actually, okay, so let me back this up. There's going to be two ways this is going to work. Some of them are going to be released depending on the manifestation petition. Some of them are going to live out their life cycle, and once they finish their life cycle, they will be used in a root work cast. So it's going to go two different ways, but that'll all be in the listing description. Anyways, the point is I'll be starting that here in about a week or two once I get my shit together. So that short window does mean a full arc, right? They grow, they live, they eat, they transform, they reach a natural death. This plays out fast enough to work with directly in the world of magic and spell casting and manifestation, with each stage directed to a specific intention as it happens. So I'm very excited about this. I'm also very excited that I'm doing it during Neptune's retrograde. That was not by mistake. So it's not a butterfly slaughterhouse. I'm going to keep repeating that over and over again. I think I wrote about that in my e-newsletter. Nothing is killed to serve the working here. The garden runs its natural course. It's a habitat, yes, but it runs its natural course. Each life is going to end on its own terms, and the cycle is witnessed and dedicated to intention and cast. Rather than worked with wings already several steps removed from a living creature, we are bringing in more energetic power by doing it this way because we have more of an energetic source to tap into and to transmute. So I hope that makes sense. If not, message me. I can explain it maybe better one-on-one. I don't know, but I'm trying to explain it here just so that people understand what this is and what this isn't. Now, here is something that you can try at home if you don't want to work with live butterflies. I call this the chrysalis release. Okay, so what you can do, and I'm also going to recommend some other things, but this first one is, write what you're releasing on a small strip of paper. Maybe it's a role you've been playing, maybe it's something you've been grieving, or maybe it's a version of yourself that just isn't serving any purpose anymore, right? Bind it tightly in cloth or paper with thread, kind of forming like a small cocoon shape. I want you to keep it undisturbed for a full lunar cycle, right? Or until it really feels complete. And then I want you to unbind it. I want you to burn that in a burn bowl, burn it safely, of course. And as you're doing that, I want you to state out loud what you are stepping into now, what role you're stepping into, what you are fully releasing. And I want it to be very affirmative, not kind of wishy-washy, like, well, I hope I'm gonna blah, blah, blah. No, you are, right? Affirmative. This is about manifestation, and you cannot manifest things that you're wishy-washy about. You have to 100% be like, this is the way it is, period. But you name out loud what you're stepping into. Again, very Buddhist. You're going to use your sacred words, your sacred syllables, sacred sound to put that out into the universe. Wow, is that the last page? So the garden begins soon. So yeah, I do invite all of you to follow along with us as this conjure butterfly garden grows, as it lives, as it transforms and completes its cycle. I am going to be documenting it as it happens, photos and videos. I'll be making little EDUs as we go. Let me close this out. Hang on. Oh, here's where I have surprises still. I did write an article on our Substack. You can check that article out. It's called The Butterfly, Psychopomp, Soul Sign, and Living Talisman. And again, that's our graveintentionsgoods.substack.com. You can get that article there. You can also sign up for our free e-newsletter on our website, graveintentionsgoods.com. I send out information all the time. Anyways, I am going to be doing short EDUs, from the start to end of this process to kind of show you what it looks like, how it works. So if it's something you want to try on your own, you kind of have seen it happen, before you kind of give it your own hand, what's all involved, what it entails. If you are interested in naming one of our butterflies for yourself and want to attach that to you and your manifest requests and petitions, definitely I'll be sending out some information to do that. And then we can do that for you, and you can, in real time watch your spell grow and be released. So I am excited about it. So again, this is brand new for us. We're just now starting a YouTube exclusive EDU series. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to talk about and when. so that I have some sort of content going out to you guys pretty regularly. And so, because this butterfly garden is taking up so much of my time, energy, and resources right now, I thought, why not talk about it a little bit tonight? Kind of talk about what the butterfly is, what it isn't, what it represents, how to work with it, and what we're doing here, which I think is really exciting. So, as always, if you guys have questions, concerns, anything at all, I'm available. You can private message me, leave me a comment. Sometimes it takes me a minute to follow up. I do get busy sometimes, but I always follow up. Other than that, you guys stay magical.